From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's coming up. Out of the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Katelyn McCullock will provide this week's insight on the cattle markets. She'll discuss the improvement in the boxed beef market of late, how far that might go. And Katelyn looks at the latest USDA hogs and pigs report and what that suggests about pork production and the ensuing impact on beef demand. Following then, K-State's A.J. Tarpoff. He'll discuss pre-breeding vaccination programs for the beef cow herd and for bulls. Ahead of spring breeding, he'll go over the main disease targets of those vaccinations and why the timing of those is so critical. And later, Jeff Wickman will have this week's 4-H segment. All that here on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Thanks for listening in. This is Agriculture Today. Glad to have you aboard on this Monday as we take up the cattle markets, first of all, and are joined by the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center from Denver, where it's headquartered. Katelyn McCullock is with us. We'll take a look, Katelyn, at a grab bag of topics relevant to the cattle markets as we go along here. But we, in general, are seeing some positive vibes in the cash-fed trade, and the boxed beef market seem to be doing well.
Yes, so I'll start with the fed cattle trade on the cash front. We typically look at the 5-area daily weighted average, which had trades Monday, but no trades Tuesday and Wednesday, and then really picked up towards the end of last week. And we're sitting about almost $2 higher than we were on Monday. Now, this market has really held firm for the last several weeks in that 114 range, and so that was overall a real positive end to that week. Futures market also moved higher for most of this week, showing some pretty big gains, but the basis right now is still in that $4 to $5 range compared to the 5 area currently. When we look at boxed beef also had a really strong week. The choice cutout moved up week over week 3%. And a lot of those gains were driven by brisket, short plate are both up 6%. Loin primal values were up 4%, as were rib primal values, where chuck and round were a little bit smaller, but all positive on the beef front. Now, on feeder cattle auctions in Kansas, we saw a little bit of slippage in the lighter weight groups. 4 to 5s were down, as were 6 to 7s, but everything 700 pounds and above seemed to move a little bit better than it had been and added several dollars compared to the week before.
At least the fed cattle trade broke loose from that $114 mark, as you said, that we've been resting on for some time. As you look at the boxed beef trade, though, is this indicative of warming weather and outdoor grilling getting in people's minds? How do you see that market right now?
So that was a negotiated number, and I think it remains to be seen what to expect from the demand profile this year. Beef moved really well last year. I mean, grilling season is normally an event that's outside, and so I don't think we had quite the same slippage in demand last year that we maybe had in some other categories because people were still able to barbecue and do those types of things. I guess this year you might be doing it with a few more people in your backyard. And the question is, will you have 2 burgers instead of 1 maybe then if there's more people around? But I'm not sure we're going to see there's much wiggle room there to push a lot of more beef in that grilling season time frame. And I think the negotiated boxed beef is going to be pretty volatile this year as we sort out as the travel sector coming back, the food service sector coming back. The loads on the comprehensive, which is all the types of sales on boxed beef, haven't really shown that it's a volume type of increase. We're not seeing a lot of heavy volumes coming out of those reports. And so I think it's more short-term needs, trying to sort out that demand profile depending on what cuts they're looking for. And I would expect that type of behavior to happen for a lot of 2021 because we just don't know how consumers are going to respond. Is it like a light switch when everyone's vaccinated, we all pack restaurants and start flying around and going to conferences? But I think on the conference front, a lot of businesses are not going to travel again this year. Mm-hmm. And for the travel sector, I have a hard time believing that on the balance of the year, we'll reach a pre-pandemic level as well as food service. I think it's just going to take a little bit more time to reach a consistent level. And so with that being said, I think that boxed beef then will probably jump around quite a bit. But right now we are reaping a jump to the high side, which is always nice.
You bet. Katelyn, in the area of competing meats, there was a USDA quarterly hogs and pigs report out this past week. The numbers were not exactly as many a market watcher had anticipated. What are the repercussions of that report on the cattle side?
Well, as you mentioned, the quarterly hogs and pigs was quite a bit below analyst expectations, as well as they made revisions to the December market hogs category. What that means is that we're going to have quite a bit less pork production than most of us thought heading into the middle part here of 2021. And from a competing meat standpoint, we're predicting that we'll have less beef production in 2021, less chicken production in 2021, and potentially less turkey production in 2021, and now a smaller increase in hog production than we were originally thinking. And so from a competing meat standpoint, relatively speaking, beef might look a little more attractive than it did ahead of this report, but there's still plenty of red meat and poultry available on the market, particularly if you think some of the pandemic trends are going to stay in place, at least for the first half of 2021. We'll really need to see expansion in those hospitality and restaurant sectors, I think, to move a lot of product and move some of those retail prices up considerably. But beef is one of the higher priced options. Lamb is very expensive right now as well on the wholesale side. And so relatively speaking, beef is still going to be roughly in that number 2 spot compared to the other proteins.
Spring breeding season for cow-calf operators will soon be taking place, Katelyn. You look at the economic outlook in the cattle markets, the economics in general in the country. What is your thinking on this question? Is this a good time for cow-calf producers to think about expanding those herd numbers?
I think based on the beef cow numbers we've seen over the last couple of years, calf crop is going to be smaller and getting smaller. And so that's going to boost up your fall calf prices. I think from our perspective, cow-calf returns are going to be better than they were a year ago in 2021. And that could provide some incentive. The big question, I think, is what happens with the cull cow market. You have some different incentives that you did maybe last year. We had some pretty good prices last year. 90% lean was really good, and that helped support that level. But this year, you're going to contend with possibly some fairly large dairy slaughter numbers. And so the cull cow market might not be quite as attractive as it was last year. With those factors in mind, I do expect there to be slightly more heifer retention. I do not expect necessarily us to flip into expansionary mode in 2021. I think it'll take into 2022 to have that level of retention happen. But what we're projecting right now is that the cattle cycle is actually a relatively flat, stable picture as opposed to a sharp liquidation phase that we've had in the past. And some of that's with the economics. I think calf prices are expected to be strong this year as well as next year. Obviously, as I mentioned, drought could potentially impact that quite a bit, as could this year's growing season. The feeder cattle contracts for deferred new crop feeding timelines are quite high, and they're really planning on a very good crop. And I think those things can change, and we could see some weakness there if we do have some planting troubles. And so all of that's to say, I would expect, a relatively stable, maybe not increasing number of heifers being retained.
Well then, Katelyn, just briefly, as we look at the trading week ahead, what are you anticipating? Anything out of the ordinary?
Define ordinary in 2021.
Legitimate question.
I think not specific to this coming week. As I mentioned, I think there's going to be quite a bit of volatility on the meat side, and a lot of that's going to depend on what's happening in these food service sectors and how they're opening. There's other factors that are now coming into the front burner. China has had a reemergence of African swine fever. We were looking at a very good export number in January. Do some of those things pull in one direction or another behind the scenes? I think all of that potentially is possible. When we look at where does beef demand go from here, we've been really focused on that domestic sector because it was such a big part of 2020. But I think in 2021, we might be looking outside our borders a little bit more as the rest of the world reemerges. And that potential to have those things move are really going to depend on key U.S. beef destinations like Japan, South Korea, Mexico, and Canada. And now more and more, China is becoming a bigger part of that. And so those are the things I'm thinking about when I think about what's going to happen with beef prices. On the cash cattle side, we're looking at a couple of factors as well. We're still seeing very high levels of Saturday kill. We're still seeing maybe not quite the daily average volumes that we saw during high slaughter times last year. And so I wonder to some extent how much increased sanitization protocols, increased social distancing, and those types of things, are they still playing a role in our ability to pull through animals? And maybe that's some of what we've seen on the cash market for the negotiated side, is that we can't necessarily still harvest animals quite as fast as we used to be. And that will potentially play a role too, if that's the case and if that continues to be the case.
We will watch all of it with great intent, and we always appreciate your insight on the markets. Katelyn, we'll talk again very soon. Many thanks to you.
Thank you.
Katelyn McCullock, the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center. That is a project, to remind you, co-sponsored by K-State and numerous other land-grant universities. We'd invite you to keep tabs on what the LMIC is putting out in the way of useful information on the markets via their website, lmic.info, lmic.info. This is Agriculture Today, and we'll be back after this break with more here on the K-State Radio Network.
Kansas farmers and ranchers are helping feed your family in the world. The largest contributor to the Kansas economy is beef cattle. How do you get that juicy steak on your plate? In order for you to enjoy your tasty meal, it requires the hard work of the producers, marketers, advertisers, processors, inspectors, transporters, packers, and consumers. So thank all these people and sit back, relax, and enjoy your tasty meal.
We're back now on Agriculture Today, and on this segment, more for you cow-calf producers as you gear your breeding herds up for that spring breeding time, not that long from now at all. We've invited by A.J. Tarpoff, beef veterinarian with K-State Research and Extension, on pre-breeding cow health and herd health, for that matter. We'll broaden it to that as we talk along here. AJ, this is an important period of time right now, you say, for producers to be sure those females are up to speed for breeding health-wise for sure.
It really is. So pre-breeding is kind of our critical time during the year. Whether, many of our producers are spring calving, we're getting prepared for the next breeding season. But this coincides even with fall calvers. So whenever we refer specifically to pre-breeding, it's regardless of when the breeding season is. So pre-breeding is really when we get the most bang for our buck for the maximum protection with some of our vaccine uses. Now, I think we always have to back up and look big picture. Why do we vaccinate our cow herd? Why do we vaccinate our cows? They're mature. Are we really concerned about them getting sick? And the answer is we vaccinate cows to protect pregnancy, even before the pregnancy occurs. Okay, so this is the prime time where we can prime our immune function to protect our cows against some particular pathogens that are infectious that can interfere with early embryonic development and actually cause pregnancy termination.
So that's what we're about with this program. And what are the main health threats that one is trying to put up a protection against?
We have several different pathogens that circulate through herds. They're here. We consider them what's called endemic, so they're expected. Okay, and that's why we yearly protect our herds from some of these pathogens. A couple of them in particular. One of them would be Vibrio. Okay, we always call it Vibrio. Of course, taxonomists have changed its name. It's actually a Campylobacter species, but Vibrio is actually a venereal disease. It's carried by the cows. The cows will clear it, so it's no chronic conditions or anything like that. But unfortunately, Vibrio can cause early embryonic loss. Okay, so it's a critical disease that we want to protect against. Thankfully, we have very efficacious vaccines that we use for it. Some of the other pathogens of concern should sound pretty, you should recognize
They're familiar, unfortunately.
Right, so it causes issues in our calves and our cows, IBR and BVD. Okay, IBR virus both of those are IBR and BVD are both viral pathogens that circulate through animals. They cause respiratory disease issues in our young calves, but in our cows, we can actually see some pretty severe reproductive issues. Okay, IBR can cause pregnancy termination throughout all stages of pregnancy, so we really want to have good protection from against IBR. But BVD is kind of that bovine viral diarrhea virus. BVD is kind of a nasty bug to deal with. If our cows during pregnancy get exposed to the BVD virus naturally, just floating through herds, we had introduced an animal that came in from the outside and we had disease introduction, it can actually cause what's called a persistently infected animal.
That's become more acute in recent years, hasn't it?
Right. So these PI animals, they are born with the virus, okay? And our number one combatant against PI creation, persistently infected animals from being born, is to vaccinate our cows pre-breeding. And that way we can build protective antibody before the breeding season, that critical period where that animal could become a PI, they have that added protection if they get exposed. So that's why we are pre-breeding vaccines to protect against some of these pathogens before the breeding season even begins is really critical.
And AJ, you say there's one more pathogen that might earn consideration here too, and that is leptospirosis.
Yes, so leptospirosis, it's commonly found out in the environment, spread by wildlife species and rodents. We do have some carrier animals that can carry it in their kidneys and excrete it out through the urine. This is also, a pathogen that can cause abortions and some different things like that later in gestation. But many of our covalent vaccines, where we have multiple valent vaccines with IBR, BVD, lepto, and Vibrio, what you'll see whenever you go to look for different vaccines, you'll see these VL3, VL5. The V is for Vibrio, the L is for lepto, and the number is how many serovars of the lepto coverage we have in that vaccine. So talk with your local veterinarian. They have a better understanding on what the local serovars are and what type of protection you would need for lepto through gestation.
Those are the target pathogens then. What about the timing of administration? That's essential here, isn't it?
Timing really is. So, I like to break things down on periods of time throughout the entire year. And the pre-breeding time frame when we really want to break down and implement our vaccine strategies is about a month to 45 days prior to breeding season. And for many of our Kansas producers that are spring calvers, that's right now. Okay, so now is the time to prepare to be able to implement these strategies. This is kind of perfect timing before we turn bulls out. Now, 30 to 45 days, I consider that, before bull turnout, or if you have an AI strategy, or if you use artificial insemination where you are syncing these animals together, I consider the beginning of any type of sync program breeding season. So if we can implement our vaccine strategies before even our sync, we can get some of the maximum performance out of our vaccines.
And while one is working their cows ahead of breeding, you suggest they might as well go ahead and work the remainder of the herd at the same time.
Absolutely. This is one time frame where we can really utilize our time to get the most efficiency. This is a perfect time. The time frame we consider is branding time, for our young calves. This might be the first time that we can implement some of our vaccines. Our calves might be 2 to 3 months of age, and now is kind of the prime time we can begin to start manipulating and priming their immune system for later in life. It's also a great time in our young calves that if we're going to use some management like castration, castration. If we haven't already castrated our young bull calves and we're making them into steers, this is also a prime time where we can initiate that and make sure that we have that coverage. Also, one of the other groups of our in our herd that are often a little bit more difficult to handle and sometimes are forgotten about is our bulls. Okay, our breeding bull battery. Now is also a prime time pre-breeding to be able to work our bulls, make sure that they have their yearly vaccines as well, and that we have them prepared for the upcoming breeding season.
Do the bulls require the same vaccine regimen basically as cows?
They really do. So we also get good coverage on Vibrio, as not just for the cows, but also for the bulls. But we don't want our bulls to succumb to some of these illnesses or also circulate some of these viral pathogens. So a yearly booster on our bulls is really important as well. They're still a member of our herd. On top of that, we are pre-breeding. So now one of the best pieces of insurance that we can buy is getting a breeding soundness exam done. We've had some issues with weather. We've had some cold snaps. Making sure that our bull battery is ready to go to work is critical.
And you're obviously testing the bulls for their fertility capacity, but amidst that process, you'd like producers to be mindful of the potential of trichomoniasis. It's not rampant by any stretch, but it can be around, and you need to assure it's not set in whatsoever here.
Right, and that's a great thing to bring up because trich can be devastating if it enters your herd. And one thing that we can do to prevent trich is we need to make sure do we know it's around? And by testing our non-virgin bulls on a yearly basis, just to ensure that they haven't had any exposure, make sure that we test them maybe during our breeding soundness exam. We can have them trich tested. We have verified negative before we turn them out to cows. And that really is cheap insurance, especially when we see the instances where trich can be absolutely devastating on the reproductive rates of a herd. It can take multiple years to be able to get back from. So something as simple as a trich test can go a long way. While it's very rare, it is reportable in the state of Kansas, but occasionally we do have a handful of cases that pop up each and every year. So it's always good to be mindful that while it's rare, it's not unheard of, and we still need to keep that in the back of our minds and maintain our stringent testing policies.
Everybody has a stake in keeping trich at bay. And AJ, if one isn't sure how they should go about formulating their vaccination programs pre-breeding for cows, for bulls, obviously consulting that local practitioner would be a great idea.
Consulting your local veterinarian and just having that good conversation, which is critical of our VCPR, the veterinary client-patient relationship. That's the mesh of the teamwork between the veterinarian and the client to make sure that there really is a custom-made program for each and every producer out there to ensure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. And that's really what it's all about, that you're getting the added coverage, you're using the right products, that they can walk through that step-by-step and recommend what works in that area.
And again, as AJ says, we are encroaching very rapidly now upon that time to administer those vaccines for the spring breeding program in advance. So do check out the options for treatment. And AJ, as always, thanks. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
AJ Tarpoff with us, beef veterinarian, K-State Research and Extension. It's worth mentioning that AJ has authored an informational fact sheet for you producers aligned with our topic here on the proper handling and administration of cattle health products by title. It gets into some key particulars like proper product storage to keep it viable, knowing the proper route of administration for that vaccine, and knowing how and when to disinfect when treating. You can read up on all of that and more in this extension fact sheet, Proper Handling and Administration of Cattle Health Products. Find it online at the K-State Research and Extension bookstore. We'll be back after this break. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
When a thunderstorm approaches, follow these safety tips. Lightning, known as the underrated killer, usually strikes the tallest objects, so avoid standing beneath trees or other isolated tall objects. Take shelter in a sturdy building. Remember, if you're close enough to hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning. Help keep you and your family safe this severe weather season. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. In today's agricultural news, as of March 1st, there were 74.8 million hogs and pigs on U.S. farms, down 2% from March 2020 and down 3% from December 1st, 2020, according to the quarterly Hogs and Pigs report published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Agricultural Statistics Service. Other key findings in the NAS report: of the 74.8 million hogs and pigs, 68.6 million were market hogs, while 6.21 million were kept for breeding. Between December 2020 and February 2021, 33.3 million pigs were weaned on U.S. farms, down 1% from the same time a year ago. From December 2020 through February 2021, U.S. hog and pig producers weaned an average of 10.94 pigs per litter. U.S. hog producers intend to have just over 3 million sows farrow between March and May this year, and 3.12 million sows farrow between June and August of this year. Iowa hog producers accounted for the largest inventory among the states at 23.8 million head. Minnesota had the second largest inventory at 9 million head. North Carolina was third with 8.5 million head. To obtain an accurate measurement of the U.S. swine industry, NAS surveyed over 4,900 operators across the nation during the first half of March. Surveyed producers were asked to report their hog and pig inventories as of March 1, 2021 by internet, mail, or telephone. The quarterly Hogs and Pigs report and all other NAS reports are available online at www.nass.usda.gov. As the general economy slowly recovers from the ill effects of the pandemic, agricultural producers are keenly interested in things like the rate of inflation and interest rate trends. One K-State agricultural economist with past ties to the Federal Reserve System says that for the here and now, producers can rest relatively easy. Brian Brigham notes that recent projections on inflation, while showing an increase, are pretty tame.
You know, if you look at the 2.5%, the fear would be, could that jump up into double digits, right? That, because we know what the Fed would do if inflation was to rise rapidly. They will let interest rates rise. And that hurts not just agriculture, that hurts the overall economy. But as we look at what the market tells us, what the Federal Reserve is telling us, like as far as their forecasts and looking ahead, I haven't seen a forecast of higher than 2.5% inflation, out, say, 10 years.
Brigham acknowledges that prices for certain agricultural inputs are going up and that any level of inflation tends to worry farmers and ranchers. However, he doesn't see that as a catalyst for higher interest rates anytime soon.
When you read or hear about the Fed saying there's low inflation, there's not much inflation, it's kind of difficult. I'm seeing rising prices, right? Fuel, energy, also see from crop inputs are all going up. Monetary policy, interest rates, if we raise them, that is a blunt club that hits the overall economy. And if the Fed is doing that based off of how corn prices are being traded and we see how volatile energy prices are, I don't know if the Fed needs to be making those decisions based off of that. They need to be looking at the longer run and looking at things that are more tied to wages and rental rates and looking at those things that, kind of for the overall economy.
That considered, what advice does Brigham have for producers in navigating these economic indicators?
If you can lock in long-term money on, say, an investment that's going to add to your farm or ranch at a very cheap rate, land, for example, you should do that. I mean, because there are some opportunities there. For producers, the one thing that I would tell them to really focus on is build that balance sheet. Make sure you have a strong liquidity position because these commodity prices, everything's cyclical. So my expectation would be at some point they're going to come down. So you need to be ready for that.
That's remarks there from K-State agricultural economist Brian Brigham. And finally, in today's agricultural news, researchers at the National Agricultural Biosecurity Center, or NABC, have been awarded 3 grants for research projects to protect animal health. The first of the grants from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or USDA APHIS, is an award for $199,340 under the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program. The project will focus on the creation of a toolkit to enable livestock exhibition organizers, local emergency management officials, and livestock owners to work together to develop comprehensive plans for the overall safety of the animals being exhibited. The second grant from USDA APHIS through its National Animal Health Laboratory Network for just over $76,000 was awarded to the Kansas State Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory, or KSVDL, who will be closely collaborating with the NABC and several other partners to design, refine, implement, and assess response in a tabletop exercise with a follow-up functional exercise of a simulated African swine fever outbreak. These will be the first exercises to focus on the laboratory response by KSVDL in the face of an outbreak. The third grant for $25,000 is to initiate a research partnership with the Department of Homeland Security, Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office, the Food, Agriculture, and Veterinary Defense, and Sandia National Laboratories. The group will develop a strategy and program that will build readiness and resilience in food, agriculture, and veterinary systems by establishing a defensive program to address intentional and unintentional threats of a catastrophic nature. According to David Hogg, program manager for the NABC, the development of an effective program for defending food, agriculture, and veterinary systems requires a thorough understanding of the sectors, infrastructure, components, stakeholders, policies, and existing programs that comprise or influence each system, in addition to the connections between them. Marty Veneer, director of NABC, says that these projects demonstrate national recognition of K-State's strengths in agricultural biosecurity through interdisciplinary collaboration and innovative research. She says that K-State's involvement in these projects will strengthen strategic partnerships and collaboration in the region as a model for multi-state and national participatory research and discovery. And this reminder to listen to the podcast version of Agriculture Today, visit agtoday.net, or using an app on your mobile device, type these search keywords: Agriculture, Today, Kansas. By tapping the subscribe button, brand new episodes of Agriculture Today will automatically arrive on your device. That's agtoday.net. This is the K-State Radio Network.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. After not being able to attend summer camp last year due to the pandemic, hundreds of Kansas 4-H youth can experience all that 4-H camp offers this summer. Although there will still be some modifications made and fewer spaces available, Southwest Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Amy Sollock says that it's a great feeling to know that 4-H camp is back because it's a worthwhile experience for youth of all ages. Amy, traditionally the camping season for Kansas 4-H starts in June, and this year it is back on, and that's really the big message, isn't it, is that camp is a go this year.
Yes, we are so excited to have 4-H camp again this summer. You know, last year we had to cancel it and call it off because of COVID. And, you know, as the trends and as the number of cases continue to decline, we really feel like we can have camp this summer in a safe and efficient way, and we know the kids are really excited to return.
I mentioned that camp is in the summer, but really all of the preparation, all of the things that you have to do is probably already underway?
Absolutely. Yeah, across the state, extension agents, myself, the folks at Rock Springs Ranch, we have been planning basically since last summer to do what we can do to prepare and make the camp as safe as possible and ensure the safety and the success of camp. there's so much that goes into a fun camping experience behind the scenes, and we want to do everything we can to make it the most efficient and beneficial experience for the kids. You know, Rock Springs Ranch has been the home of Kansas 4-H Camp for over 75 years. I think actually we're celebrating 75 years. So we've been at this a long time. It's kind of this stronghold, cornerstone experience for 4-H'ers across the state, and generations back, people talk about the wonderful time they've had at Rock Springs Ranch. And one of the cool things is you meet kids that you would never otherwise meet. You know, you get to interact with them in the outdoors and experience a lot of things for the first time, whether it's canoeing, horseback riding, fishing. You know, there's a number of things available to kids to experience.
Yeah, it's really kind of a combination of fun events and leadership-type activities and projects, and really just a nice mix of everything.
Absolutely. There is something for all ages at camp. You know, we start going to Rock Springs Ranch around 2nd, 3rd grade. It kind of depends across the state. And on up through high school, we have opportunities. So we've got a cool camp rent event for those sort of tweens, those 12, 13, 14-year-olds. And then we even have counselor or leadership opportunities for our high school age youth. So there really is something for everybody.
They also get involved from the standpoint that they do a lot of the work themselves during the camp.
That's right. One of the cool things for kids to experience is, cleaning up their cabins, dish crews, kitchen duties, cleaning up the pool, keeping track of your stuff. They gain so much independence from even something as simple as, choosing what they're going to wear on a given day at camp. You know, mom and dad aren't there to lay it out for them. They need to know they've got to brush their teeth. And, of course, we've got adults who are trained, the high school youth that are trained to help and sort of assist kids throughout the week to make sure that it's a safe and successful experience.
And because there are so many things that they can participate in, is this something that they kind of set a schedule themselves, or do they just kind of go along in a group?
Yeah, the folks at Rock Springs Ranch have an excellent tiered structure, and that's how we refer to it. So Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 have a bit of a different schedule. And so our Tier 1 kids are the campers that are maybe there for the first or second time, and they kind of follow a set of rotated activities. And then, you come back years 3, 4, and 5, and you're in Tier 2, and you're doing things a little more advanced, a little different, and then on up to Tier 3, same thing goes. So, every year is slightly different, and it builds upon the year before. But, of course, if you've never been to camp before, jump right in, and we'll meet you where you're at and make sure that you have a great experience.
And a lot of the senior 4-H'ers have an opportunity to be a leader for part of this, don't they?
Yes. Our high school age youth have a tremendous opportunity to develop their leadership skills and really put those into practice while they're at camp. And it's one of these really deep and meaningful sort of high-impact experiences that our teens talk about for years after they attend camp. And I think, employers, college professors can start to pick up on some of those experiences as they see and work with those kids. They know that they've got this different, really high set of leadership abilities compared to kids that haven't had that same experience at 4-H camp.
Maybe some of the nuts and bolts. Amy, how does it work in terms of getting signed up for camp and finding out all the information that they need to know?
Yeah, the big thing you need to know is if you're interested in sending your child to camp this summer, contact your local K-State Research and Extension office. We have a number of camping opportunities available across the state, and it kind of depends on where you're at and when you camp and who you camp with. So contact your local K-State Research and Extension office, and if you don't know where that is, you can look us up online at kansas4h.org.
I imagine there's going to be a wide interest this year because of the fact that you weren't able to have camp last year, so this is probably something they need to start planning now and kind of get the ball rolling.
Yeah, start planning now. We actually are operating at a reduced capacity this year because of COVID. We want to make sure we're doing things as safely and maintain the health and integrity of our campers. So space is somewhat limited this year. So if you're interested, contact them soon so that you can reserve a spot.
I know there is a cost associated with the camp, but there's also some scholarships available as well.
Yeah, and again, that varies a little bit across the state. So depending on where you're at, how long you camp for, or, if it's a one-night opportunity versus a 3 or 4 night opportunity. The pricing varies, and the local scholarships also vary across the state. So contact your local extension office to find out what's available to you.
Well, it is a great growth opportunity, a great opportunity to learn, and really a lot of fun at the same time.
Absolutely. Camp is one of my most favorite experiences that we offer throughout the Kansas 4-H program. It's really great to see the kids log off and disconnect from devices and really immerse themselves in their surroundings at Rock Springs Ranch and develop friendships and some independence. And it's just a phenomenal learning experience from every aspect.
That's Southwest Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Amy Sollock. Several summer camps are currently scheduled in June, including Kansas 4-H Campference. Because space is limited, youth interested in participating in summer camp at Rock Springs are urged to contact their local extension office as soon as possible. And to learn more about summer camp, visit kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.